My ungrateful son stole everything, but I had one last asset he didn't know. True story. Have you ever felt the slow, insidious chill of losing yourself, piece by agonizing piece, to the relentless tide of another's ambition, only to find yourself utterly adrift, discarded by the very people you cherished most? Have you ever watched the child you devoted your life to cast you aside for the person they married? I have. But they didn't know I would be the one to write the final chapter of their story. The air in that tiny apartment was suffocating, not just from the lack of space, but from the crushing weight of an unbearable silence that pressed down on me like a physical burden. Every breath felt shallow, every corner seemed to close in. It was barely big enough for me and my few remaining belongings: a worn armchair, a small, chipped dresser, a box of old photographs that felt like a mockery of a life once lived. This cramped, airless space was a stark, humiliating contrast to the spacious, sun-drenched family home I had lived in for over 40 years. My home, filled with the echoes of laughter, the scent of fresh-baked bread, the quiet comfort of Arthur's pipe tobacco. Here, there was only the stale scent of other people's lives, a constant reminder of my displacement. Outside, the city hummed, a distant, indifferent roar, oblivious to the quiet devastation unfolding within these four cramped, peeling walls. Inside, the only sound was the rustle of papers in Reese's hand, a sound that grated on my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard, each crinkle a fresh wound. "Lyra," he began, his voice dripping with a false sincerity that always made my stomach churn, a sickening lurch of premonition. He stood in the doorway, a broad, arrogant figure, blocking the meager light that dared to seep into the room, his shadow falling over me like a pall, chilling me to the bone. My daughter, Alara, sat on the edge of the worn sofa opposite me, her usually vibrant eyes fixed on her hands, twisting a loose thread on her sweater with a frantic energy that spoke volumes. She couldn't meet my gaze, and that, more than anything Reese could ever say, was the true dagger to my heart. It was a silence louder than any scream, a betrayal more profound than any spoken word. "We've been over this," Reese continued, his tone shifting, hardening, as if he were addressing a disobedient child, or perhaps, a senile relative who had lost all capacity for reason. The condescension was a familiar, bitter taste in my mouth. "This arrangement simply isn't sustainable. Your financial needs are becoming a burden. We've gone above and beyond, providing you with this." He gestured vaguely around the small living area, as if this shoebox was some grand gesture of charity, a testament to their boundless generosity. "And frankly, it's time for you to become more independent." My eyes followed his dismissive wave, taking in the chipped paint, the stained carpet, the single window overlooking a brick wall. This shoebox, which they had grudgingly provided, barely 4 months after he had convinced Alara to sign away the deed to my ancestral home. My home. The home where Alara had taken her first steps, where her father and I had built our life, celebrated triumphs, mourned losses, where every nook and cranny held a cherished memory. The old oak tree in the garden where Alara had her swing, the kitchen where we baked cookies for school fairs, the study where Arthur would read to her by the fire. That home was now gone, sold off for a quick profit, a mere transaction in Reese's ruthless world, and I was being told I was a burden, in a tiny, rented apartment barely larger than my old walk-in closet. The irony was a suffocating weight. Independent? I managed, my voice raspy with disbelief, a sound that barely escaped my throat. Yet, beneath the shock, a cold resolve was beginning to crystallize within me, hardening like ice. "Reese, you promised me a comfortable retirement. You promised Alara that selling the house for investment purposes would secure my future, that I would be taken care of. You painted a picture of a quiet life, free from financial worry, perhaps a small, charming cottage near the coast, and here I am, being told I'm a liability in a space barely larger than my old walk-in closet." Reese scoffed, a short, sharp sound that was pure contempt, a venomous hiss that made my blood run cold. "Promises evolve, Lyra. Market conditions change. You simply aren't pulling your weight. We offered you a chance, an opportunity, and you've just been a drain. This apartment, even, is too much. We need you out by the end of the month. He spoke as if discussing a faulty appliance, not a human being, not his wife's mother. My eyes flickered to Alara. She still wouldn't look at me, her gaze firmly fixed on the frayed thread, as if her entire world depended on unraveling it. Her silence was deafening, a betrayal far deeper than Rhys's cruel words. It wasn't just silence, it was complicity. Her chin trembled slightly, her shoulders hunched, drawing inward as if to make herself disappear. She was a puppet, a beautiful, intelligent woman reduced to a mute bystander in her own mother's humiliation. She had let him do this. She had stood by, weakly, or perhaps even actively, believing his lies, blinded by his charm and the illusion of a grand future he painted for them, a future that clearly had no room for me. Alara, I whispered, my voice breaking slightly despite my best efforts to keep it steady, to hide the raw pain tearing through me. Do you have nothing to say? Is this truly what you want for your mother? For the woman who raised you, who sacrificed everything for your happiness? She flinched, as if struck by an invisible hand, but her eyes remained glued to her hands. Mom, she mumbled, her voice barely audible, a pathetic whimper. Rhys. Rhys knows best. This is just how things are. It's for the best, truly. For everyone. She sounded rehearsed, like a child repeating a lesson she didn't quite understand but knew she had to recite. For everyone? I echoed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, acrid and bitter. Or just for Rhys and his pockets? For his next investment opportunity, that will inevitably leave someone else poorer, someone else broken? Rhys stepped forward then, a glint of something truly malicious in his eyes, a predatory gleam I hadn't seen so overtly before. That's quite enough, Lyra. The eviction notice is formal. You have 30 days. Consider this your final warning. Any resistance, and we'll pursue legal action. We'll claim financial distress, your unwillingness to cooperate, whatever it takes to ensure a swift and clean break. He tapped the papers in his hand, a triumphant flourish. We have the signed deed, after all. The house is ours. You have no claim. That was it. The final straw. The casual cruelty, the audacious lie about financial distress, a man who drove luxury cars and wore designer suits claiming financial distress, the smug certainty that he had won. It wasn't just the eviction, it was the brazenness of his fraud, the complete lack of humanity, and the heartbreaking, gut-wrenching silence of my own daughter. In that moment, something inside me, something that had been dormant for too long, smothered by grief and a mother's endless patience, snapped into sharp, unforgiving focus. The gentle, patient mother who had put her child's happiness above her own, who had weathered every storm with quiet dignity, vanished. In her place, a cold, calculating strategist emerged. He had thought he had all the cards. But he didn't know I was holding the real ace, a card dealt by a man far wiser than he could ever imagine. And you think this was the first time? Oh, if only. That day, with Rhys's sneering face and Alara's averted eyes, wasn't the beginning of my suffering, but the agonizing crescendo of years of quiet erosion. It had started subtly, insidiously, like a slow-growing vine that eventually chokes the life out of everything around it, wrapping its tendrils around trust, dignity, and love until only a hollow shell remained. Rhys entered our lives like a whirlwind, all charm and dazzling smiles, a force of nature that swept Alara off her feet. He was handsome, with a predatory glint in his eyes that I initially mistook for ambition. He was undeniably charismatic, ambitious, and utterly captivating, or so Alara thought. When she first brought him home, my late husband, Arthur, had been gone for 2 years, and the house often felt too big, too empty, echoing with a silence that was almost unbearable. Alara was still finding her feet after his passing, navigating her burgeoning career as a graphic designer, and seemed utterly smitten, radiating a happiness I hadn't seen in her since childhood. I wanted her to be happy, truly, desperately so. After the pain of losing Arthur, seeing her joy was a balm to my soul. So, I welcomed Reese, perhaps too readily, eager to fill the void, to see my daughter secure and loved. In the beginning, he was attentive, even flattering. He'd ask about my day with an almost theatrical interest, compliment my cooking with effusive praise, talk about his grand plans for Alara and their future, always weaving me into the narrative as a cherished elder. He was always talking about investments and opportunities, phrases that, looking back, were like sirens luring ships to their doom, glittering promises concealing treacherous rocks. He spoke of a new life for Alara, one of luxury and freedom, a life I, in my quiet grief, hadn't been able to fully provide after Arthur's passing. I remember thinking, finally, Alara has found someone who can provide for her, someone strong, someone who can offer her the world. Oh, how foolish I was, how blinded by my love for her and my own lingering grief. The shift began subtly, imperceptibly at first, like the gradual dimming of a light you don't notice until the room is almost dark. Little things. He'd interrupt me mid-sentence at dinner, not maliciously, but with an air of dismissive superiority, a casual wave of his hand, as if my thoughts were insignificant, my words a mere distraction from his brilliant monologue. He'd make jokes about my old-fashioned ways, my quaint taste in decor, or my lack of business acumen, always delivered with a wink to Alara that suggested it was all in good fun. But the jokes landed, each one a tiny barb. Alara would laugh along, a nervous, almost forced laugh that never quite reached her eyes, and then quickly change the subject, a silent plea for peace. I'd brush it off, telling myself he was just young, ambitious, perhaps a little socially clumsy, still finding his place in the family. I made excuses for him, because I wanted to believe in the happiness he promised Alara. Then came the financial requests. Always presented as temporary loans, or investments that would yield massive returns, always with an elaborate, jargon-filled explanation that sounded impressive but made little sense. Lyra, if we could just borrow a little for this new venture, a revolutionary tech startup, think of the passive income it will generate for your retirement. We're talking substantial returns, enough to live like royalty, he'd say, his eyes gleaming with an almost feverish intensity. I, still grieving Arthur and eager to see Alara settled, truly believed that by helping them, I was securing her future. I would dip into my dwindling savings, the nest egg Arthur had meticulously built for my later years. They never paid me back. Not a cent. Each time, Alara would make excuses for him. He's just under so much pressure, Mom. It's a huge deal, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The money will come back, I promise. He's good for it. And I, foolishly, would believe her, or at least pretend to, because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. It wasn't just money, it was trust, eroding slowly with each unpaid loan. The house, my sanctuary, the very embodiment of my life with Arthur, slowly became his domain. He'd rearrange furniture without asking, shifting beloved pieces to suit his modern aesthetic, stripping the rooms of their familiar warmth. He'd invite his loud, boisterous friends over without consulting me, turning my quiet evenings into raucous parties that left behind messes for me to clean up, spilled drinks, discarded food, an endless trail of debris. I became less the lady of the house and more, as he once jokingly called me to his friends during a particularly loud gathering, the resident housekeeper. The casualness of the remark stung, a sharp, humiliating blow, but Alara just giggled, a hollow, empty sound, and told him to be nice. Nice? He was turning me into a servant in my own home, slowly erasing my presence, my identity. My daughter, my sweet, thoughtful Alara, began to drift away, drawn deeper into Risa's orbit, like a moth to a dangerous, mesmerizing flame. Her conversations with me grew shorter, less intimate, revolving only around superficial topics or Risa's latest, brilliant idea. If I tried to voice a concern about Reese, about his increasingly aggressive demeanor or his questionable business dealings, she'd become defensive, even angry. Mom, you just don't understand him. He's trying so hard, making a life for us. You're being too critical, too old-fashioned. You don't appreciate his vision. She was so blinded by his charm, so desperate for his approval, for the glittering future he promised her, that she couldn't see the slow, systematic dismantling of our relationship, or the way he was isolating me, inch by inch, from her, from my own life. She became his puppet, repeating his rhetoric, defending his every slight, absorbing his dismissive attitude towards me. It was as if he had cast a spell over her, and I, her mother, was an inconvenient, archaic obstacle in their modern, prosperous life. My heart ached, watching her transform, a stranger in my own daughter's skin. The breaking point, before the final eviction attempt, was when Reese began pushing hard for the sale of the family home. It's an aging asset, Lyra, he'd declare, pacing my living room like a CEO in a boardroom, his voice full of self-importance. It's tying up so much capital, valuable resources that could be working for you. If we sell it, we can invest in something truly lucrative, something that will provide you with a real comfortable retirement, not just this dusty old place with its endless repairs and upkeep. He painted a vivid picture, a beautiful, modern apartment for me, filled with light and contemporary comforts, exotic holidays to places I'd only dreamed of, financial freedom beyond anything Arthur had provided. Elara, swept up in his grand vision, her eyes sparkling with unearned optimism, echoed his sentiments with a fervor that broke my heart. Mom, it's a smart move. Reese has done all the research. This will be so much better for you. Imagine, no more upkeep, no more worries, just pure enjoyment. I resisted at first, my refusal born from a deep, almost primal connection to the house. This house held decades of memories, the very essence of Arthur. Every chipped banister, every uneven floorboard, every rose in the garden spoke of him, of our life together. Selling it felt like selling a piece of my soul. But Reese was relentless, his arguments increasingly aggressive, and Elara, his most ardent cheerleader, applied emotional pressure I couldn't withstand. Mom, please. We just want you to be happy, to be secure. Don't you trust us? Don't you trust me? Trust. That word, thrown like a stone, shattered my defenses. I trusted Elara, or at least, the memory of the Elara I had raised. And if she truly believed this was for my benefit, how could I refuse? I was tired, worn down by years of quiet battles, by the constant erosion of my peace. I just wanted peace, and for my daughter to be happy, even if it meant sacrificing my own. So, I reluctantly agreed. Reese brought the papers, his face alight with barely concealed triumph. He explained them quickly, a torrent of jargon-filled sentences, pointing to places for Elara to sign with a hurried, impatient gesture. It's just transferring the deed to a holding company for investment purposes, Lyra. It makes everything cleaner, more efficient for the big sale, streamlines the capital allocation. I wasn't asked to sign anything then. He assured me Elara's signature, as next of kin and future inheritor, was sufficient for the investment setup. I watched my daughter, my own flesh and blood, sign away my home. My home. My heart ached, a deep, hollow pain, but I told myself it was for the best. For her best. And for a brief, fleeting moment, there was a quiet, almost smug look on Reese's face, a look I now recognize as pure, unadulterated triumph, a predator savoring its kill. The house sold quickly. Faster than I expected, and for significantly less than I thought it was worth, but Reese simply shrugged and blamed the volatile market conditions and unforeseen economic shifts. Timing is everything, Lyra. But don't worry, the investments are already in motion, growing exponentially even as we speak. I was given a small sum, a pittance compared to the true value of the house, and told it was for my immediate needs while the big investments matured. He even gave me a detailed, impressive-looking spreadsheet, full of charts and figures that meant nothing to me, but seemed to soothe Elara's conscience. Then came the temporary apartment, the shoebox, and the slow, agonizing realization that the comfortable retirement was a cruel, elaborate lie, culminating in that final, chilling eviction notice. My patience had run out. My love had been scorned. My trust had been shattered. And they had no idea what was coming. They thought I was defeated, a harmless old woman. But they didn't know about the final secret my late husband left me. Arthur was a man of immense foresight, a quiet observer of human nature. He had seen things, intuited vulnerabilities, even in those closest to us, long before they became apparent. He loved Alara dearly, with every fiber of his being, but he also recognized her impressionable nature, her tendency to be swayed by charisma, particularly when it came to a romantic partner. He had seen the early warning signs, even before Rhys fully revealed his true colors, a subtle shift in Alara's judgment, a naive eagerness to please. After his diagnosis, as he was putting his affairs in order with his longtime lawyer, Mr. Henderson, Arthur spent weeks meticulously crafting a plan, not just a will, but a safeguard, a fortress against potential future storms. He explained it to me one quiet evening, his voice gentle but firm, his hand clasping mine. "Lyra," he had said, his eyes filled with a love so profound it still brings tears to my eyes, "I've taken steps to ensure your absolute security, no matter what happens to me. I know you're generous to a fault, and your heart is always open. But some people, they can prey on that, especially when emotions are high and judgment is clouded. Especially when family is involved." He then explained that years ago, shortly after my husband's death, as I was navigating the complexities of probate and grieving deeply, he had transferred the true ownership of the family home, along with several other significant financial assets, a meticulously managed portfolio of blue-chip stocks, a substantial stake in a lucrative tech startup that he had invested in early, and a robust annuity designed to provide a steady income, into an irrevocable trust. He hadn't just put it in any trust, he had set up a very specific, ironclad arrangement. This trust was established under a discreet, almost anonymous name, managed by a reputable, independent firm Arthur had known and trusted for decades, a firm far removed from our immediate financial circles. The key clause, the linchpin of his genius plan? Only I, Lyra Petrov, could access or dissolve it, and only if my financial security was directly threatened, or if I faced destitution due to the actions of others. It was a failsafe, a hidden fortress against any future storm, built with foresight and love. He told me he hadn't told me earlier because he didn't want me to worry, or to feel the weight of this secret until it was absolutely necessary. He wanted me to live freely, to make my own choices, to trust, but always with this safety net beneath me, a guardian angel watching over my future. At the time, I didn't fully grasp the genius or the critical importance of his plan. I was too overwhelmed with grief, too trusting in the inherent goodness of people, especially those closest to me. I nodded, signed a few papers his lawyer presented, routine probate documents, dear, and then, in my haze of sorrow, put it out of my mind, trusting Arthur implicitly, as I always had. I truly thought the house was simply in my name, and would naturally pass to Alara upon my eventual passing. Little did I know, Arthur had already moved the real title into the trust. Rhys, for all his supposed business acumen, for all his boasting about his sharp financial mind, had only looked at the surface-level public records, the deed that appeared to be in my name, not the deeper, legally protected ownership held by the trust. He was too arrogant, too convinced of his own cleverness, to dig deeper. When Rhys started pushing for the sale, demanding that Alara sign away the deed, I had felt a pang of unease, a flicker of doubt, but I went along with it, because Alara pleaded, her eyes wide and earnest, and because I trusted her, and because I didn't want to cause conflict, to be the critical mother he always accused me of being. Rhys had been so quick, so smooth in his machinations. He'd rushed Alara through the signing, claiming it was for a shell corporation he'd set up to make the investment cleaner, more tax efficient. He even proudly showed Alara the paperwork, the deed transferred to Rhys and Associates Holdings LLC, a name that now sounded like a sick joke. What a fool. What a brilliant, self-serving fool. He thought he was so clever, creating his own little illusion to steal what he thought was mine. He had sold an empty shell, a phantom property, a mere illusion of ownership he himself had orchestrated. The true deed, the one that mattered, was locked away, protected by Arthur's unwavering foresight, waiting for this very moment. The moment Rhys delivered that eviction notice, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction, and Alara sat there, silent and complicit, her gaze averted, the memory of Arthur's words, the specific details of the trust, flooded back with startling clarity. Only if your financial security is directly threatened. That was it. This was the moment Arthur had foreseen. The full weight of Rhys's treachery, and Alara's tragic weakness, crashed down on me. It wasn't just about money, it was about dignity, about betrayal, about the ultimate disrespect shown to Arthur's legacy, and to me. My heart ached, not just for myself, but for the daughter I felt I had irrevocably lost to a conman's lies. But alongside that pain, a fierce, cold anger ignited within me, burning away the last vestiges of my gentle nature. Arthur had given me a weapon, a shield, forged from his love and wisdom. And now I would use it. The decision was made, sharp and clear. No more patience. No more quiet suffering. They had pushed me to the edge, believing me helpless, believing me defeated, an old woman to be easily cast aside. They would soon learn that a cornered lioness is the most dangerous of all. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady, a newfound strength coursing through my veins, and dialed the number Arthur had given me all those years ago. The number of the trust's managing firm. The game, I realized with a chilling certainty, was about to change. And then, the day came. The day everything would be laid bare, the truth brought to light like a sudden, blinding flash. It wasn't a dramatic family dinner, no grand public spectacle filled with shouting and accusations. This was far more precise, far more devastating, designed to dismantle Rhys's carefully constructed world piece by piece. I had arranged for a formal meeting. Not in my cramped apartment, nor in Rhys's ostentatious office, but in the neutral, clinical setting of the law firm Arthur had used for decades, a firm that also happened to handle the trust. My lawyer, a stern, impeccably dressed woman named Ms. Davies, sat beside me, her presence radiating competence and quiet authority, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Opposite us, sat Rhys, looking smug and confident, a thick folder of papers in front of him, clearly expecting an easy victory. Beside him, Alara, looking pale and nervous, fidgeted incessantly with the strap of her handbag, her eyes darting between me and Rhys, a silent plea in their depths. They had been summoned under the pretense of discussing final arrangements for my departure, a ruse I had orchestrated to ensure their attendance, to ensure they walked right into the trap Arthur had so brilliantly set. The meeting began with Ms. Davies calmly reviewing the eviction notice Rhys had served, her voice measured and composed. Rhys, ever the opportunist, interrupted, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. It's all quite straightforward, Ms. Davies. Lyra is a financial burden, and the property has been legally sold. We're simply here to finalize the logistics of her departure, perhaps discuss a small, final settlement as a gesture of goodwill. He spoke as if he were granting me a great favor. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, almost unnervingly so, a quiet ripple in the tense air. Is that so, Rhys? Legally sold, you say? With all the proper documentation and ownership transfers accounted for? His smirk widened, a testament to his supreme overconfidence. Absolutely. We have the signed deed, Lyra. Alara signed it herself, transferring ownership to my company. It's all perfectly legitimate. The house is gone. The money from the sale is being invested. He waved his hand dismissively as if the details were beneath him, and you, Lyra, are simply no longer part of our plans for that property. You have no claim, no leverage. I leaned back in my chair, a faint, knowing smile touching my lips, a silent acknowledgement of the trap springing shut. Rhys, dear boy, I began, my voice laced with a sweetness that must have chilled him to the bone, a contrast to the steel in my eyes. You sold an empty shell. You sold a phantom. You sold nothing at all. His face, initially dismissive, froze. The smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of confusion. What are you talking about, Lyra? Don't be absurd. The deed was signed. The transaction went through. It's a matter of public record. My lawyers verified everything. Indeed, it is, Ms. Davies interjected, her voice cutting through the rising tension like a sharp blade. She slid a thick, bound document across the polished table, its pages rustling ominously. Mr. Reese, you are correct that a deed was signed. And the transaction did go through. However, the deed your wife signed, the one transferring the property to Reese and Associates Holdings LLC, was for a property that, legally speaking, had not been in Lyra Petrov's personal name for many years prior to your orchestrated transfer. The property was legally owned by the Arthur Petrov Irrevocable Trust, of which my client, Lyra Petrov, is the sole beneficiary and the only individual with the authority to access or dissolve its assets under specific conditions. Conditions, I might add, that your recent eviction attempt certainly met. Reese's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear starting to replace his smugness, like a crack appearing in a carefully constructed facade. Ilara finally looked up, her brow furrowed in confusion, her pale face etched with dawning horror. What does she mean, Mom? The house, it wasn't yours? Years ago, after your father passed, I explained, looking directly at Ilara, my heart aching for the truth she was about to learn, for the innocence she had lost. He made arrangements. He knew I was too trusting, too eager to see you happy, perhaps even naive. He set up an irrevocable trust. A very specific kind of trust, designed to protect me from any possible future misfortune or manipulation. The family home, along with a number of other significant financial assets, was transferred into that trust long before you ever met Reese. The deed you signed, Ilara, was for a shell corporation your husband set up to trick you, to give you the illusion of control and legitimacy. He believed he was tricking me, but in reality, he was selling a legal fiction. He sold a house he never truly owned, because the true ownership, the actual title, resided within that trust. And that trust, my dear, can only be accessed or dissolved by me, and only if my financial security is directly threatened. Which, by your eviction attempt, it certainly was. Reese's face went ashen. He lunged for the document Ms. Davies had placed on the table, frantically flipping through pages, his breathing growing ragged, each page turned a desperate gasp for air. His eyes scanned the legal terms, the trust deeds, the dates of establishment, the names of the managing firm. His jaw worked, his face contorted in a mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated panic. He looked up, his eyes wild, darting between Miss Davies and me. This is impossible. This is fraud. You can't just hide assets like that. This is some elaborate trick. It's not hiding, Mr. Reese, Ms. Davies calmly corrected him, her voice unwavering, a voice of unassailable law. It's asset protection. Perfectly legal, and brilliantly executed by Mr. Petrov. And the true fraud, I'm afraid, lies in your attempt to divest my client of property she did not personally own, and then attempt to evict her based on a fabricated premise of your ownership. Not to mention the misappropriation of funds from the sale of said phantom property, which constitutes a separate and very serious offense. I watched him, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him in real time. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly gray. He tried to bluster, to threaten, to call for his own lawyers, but his words caught in his throat, hollow and desperate, devoid of their usual venom. He understood. He had not only failed to steal my wealth, but he had committed a massive fraud, selling a property he didn't own, pocketing money for a non-existent transaction. The legal ramifications would be immense, a tidal wave of ruin. Then, my gaze shifted to Ilara. Her face was a mask of horror, confusion, and dawning realization, a kaleidoscope of shattered illusions. Her eyes, finally, met mine. They were filled with unshed tears, and a profound, heartbreaking regret that mirrored the pain in my own heart. She looked from Reese, whose face was now contorted in a mask of raw panic and rage, to me, sitting calmly, betraying no emotion save for a quiet strength. The puppet strings had been severed. She saw him, truly saw him, for the first time, not the charming, ambitious man she thought she loved, but a con artist, a manipulator, a man who had used her to try and destroy her own mother. "Mom," she whispered, her voice choked with tears, a fragile sound that broke the heavy silence. He actually did this? To us? To you? He made me sign that?" I offered her a sad, knowing smile, a smile that held both compassion and an insurmountable distance. "Yes, Elara. He did. And you, my dear, stood by and let him do it. You trusted him more than your own mother, more than the instincts I tried to instill in you. You let him convince you that this was for the best. The truth is rarely pretty, is it? Especially when it peels back the layers of a life built on lies." Reese finally exploded, yelling obscenities, accusing me of revenge, of ruining his life, of being a vengeful old woman. But his words were hollow, desperate, echoing emptily in the sterile room. Miss Davies simply pressed a button under the table. Within moments, 2 imposing security guards entered the room. "Mr. Reese," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, "your presence is no longer required. My office will be in touch regarding the appropriate legal actions. And I assure you, they will be significant, encompassing not only the fraud regarding the property but also the various other investments you coerced my client into funding." He was escorted out, still shouting, his grand plans reduced to dust, his carefully constructed facade crumbling into nothingness. Elara remained, slumped in her chair, tears streaming down her face, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of shattered trust and irreversible choices. The day of reckoning had come, and the truth, as Arthur had always taught me, had set me free. And in doing so, it had exposed a deceit far greater than Reese could ever have imagined, a darkness that had consumed my daughter's judgment and nearly destroyed my life. So where is Reese, who tried to evict me, now, you ask? Well, his carefully constructed world imploded spectacularly. The investment company he bragged about was revealed as nothing more than a shell, a front for his fraudulent schemes. The sale of my phantom house led to an avalanche of legal troubles. The buyers, realizing they'd purchased nothing but thin air, pursued him relentlessly for fraud and misrepresentation, demanding their money back with interest. His other investments, which were mostly elaborate scams designed to fleece unsuspecting individuals, came crashing down as well, leaving his few remaining partners equally furious and eager to testify against him. He lost everything, his reputation, his false wealth, and his freedom, as legal charges mounted against him from multiple fronts. He's facing years of litigation, and likely, a significant amount of time behind bars, precisely where he belongs. His arrogance was his undoing. He thought he was playing chess, moving pawns around a board, but I was playing a completely different game, one with rules he couldn't even comprehend, a game of legacy and truth. And Elara? My daughter. The one I had given everything for. The one who had stood by Reese, blinded by his charm, deafened by his promises. The truth hit her like a tidal wave, washing away all her illusions. She saw Reese for what he truly was, a con artist, a ruthless manipulator, a man who would gladly sacrifice anyone, even her own mother, for personal gain. The initial shock gave way to profound shame and regret, a sorrow so deep it carved new lines on her face. She lost Reese, of course, but more importantly, she lost the illusion she had built her life around, the dream of a glamorous future that had blinded her to his true nature. The trust between us, the mother and daughter bond, was irrevocably fractured. It wasn't just Reese who had betrayed me, it was Elara's complicity, her silence, her willingness to believe his lies over her own instincts, over the love we shared. She reached out, trying to apologize, trying to repair the damage, sending flowers and tearful letters, but some wounds run too deep, leaving scars that may never fully heal. I reclaimed my home, my dignity, my financial security, thanks to Arthur's foresight. I now live in peace, surrounded by the cherished memories of a life well lived, free from the shadow of their deceit, but forever marked by the pain of a daughter lost. I often think about the lesson in all of this. It's a harsh one, but perhaps necessary. Love can be blind, and ambition can be ruthless. But patience, when pushed to its absolute limit, transforms into an unstoppable force. Never underestimate the quiet strength of someone you have dismissed. Never assume that silence equates to weakness. And never, ever test anyone's patience to its limits, especially when that person has nothing left to lose but their dignity, because sometimes, the person you thought you had defeated is the one holding the final, devastating card. Are there any other mothers out there who have forgotten themselves for the sake of their children's happiness? Who have sacrificed, endured, and then found themselves pushed to the brink of losing everything? You are not alone. My channel has many similar stories of life lessons, of resilience, and of reclaiming one's power when faced with betrayal. If my story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss our next story. And I invite you to share your own troubles, your thoughts, and your experiences in the comments below. Let's learn from each other.